Imagine a humble man, weathered by years of exile, walking into the glittering halls of the most powerful king on earth. Moses, now aged and wise, stood face to face with Pharaoh. His voice was firm but filled with divine authority as he declared, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands, 'Let my people go so they may worship me in the wilderness.'" Pharaoh, seated on a golden throne, surrounded by wealth and advisors, looked down at Moses with contempt. "Who is this Lord that I should obey him?" he sneered. Moses did not flinch, knowing the battle ahead was not his, but God's, and so began the epic confrontation between human pride and divine power. Standing at the edge of the mighty Nile, Moses raised his staff. The river, a symbol of life and prosperity for Egypt, flowed peacefully. But as the staff descended, the water began to change. The clear, life-giving flow darkened to crimson. Fish gasped for air and floated lifeless to the surface. The air filled with a nauseating stench that carried despair through the land. Egyptians, young and old, crowded the riverbanks, their faces etched with disbelief and horror. Desperate for water, they dug feverishly into the sandy shores, but there was no escape from the judgment that had come. At first, the Nile seemed calm after its bloody transformation. Then came a new horror. Frogs, thousands, millions of them, emerged from the river, invading the land. They leapt into kitchens, onto beds, and even into Pharaoh's golden halls. The croaking became a deafening chorus of chaos. Pharaoh, his patience worn thin, begged Moses to make it stop. "I will let your people go," he promised. But when Moses prayed and the frogs were gone, Pharaoh's heart hardened once again. The decaying bodies of frogs piled high, a haunting reminder of what defiance against God could bring. Aaron struck the ground with his staff, and the very dust of Egypt seemed to rise into the air. But this was no ordinary dust. It came alive. Tiny, biting gnats swarmed over man and beast alike. The irritation and helplessness spread through the kingdom like wildfire. Even Pharaoh's magicians, once confident in their tricks, confessed, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's pride held firm, even as his people begged for relief. And then came the flies, swarms so thick they darkened the air and invaded every home in Egypt. The relentless buzzing and biting left the people sleepless and tormented. Pharaoh's palace, usually a place of wealth and comfort, became a battlefield against this tiny, unstoppable enemy. Yet, in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there was peace, no flies, no chaos. Pharaoh saw this distinction but still refused to bow. The fields of Egypt, once bustling with the sounds of livestock, fell silent. A deadly pestilence swept through the land, sparing nothing. Farmers stood helplessly as their cattle, horses, and sheep collapsed before their eyes. Yet, in Goshen, the livestock of the Israelites remained untouched. Pharaoh, furious and perplexed, sent investigators to confirm the truth. Even as the evidence piled up, his heart grew harder still. Without warning, a new calamity struck Egypt. Painful boils erupted on the skin of every man and beast. The suffering was unbearable. Pharaoh's advisors, once confident and proud, were now doubled over in agony. Even the magicians who had boasted of their power could not stand before Moses. The once thriving cities of Egypt fell silent, save for the cries of those afflicted. Yet Pharaoh, consumed by his own stubbornness, refused to relent. Then came a storm like none Egypt had ever seen. From the heavens rained hail mixed with fire, crashing down on fields and homes alike. Crops were destroyed, trees shattered, and the cries of the people echoed through the land. Pharaoh, watching from the safety of his palace, saw the devastation unfold. "Enough," he cried out, calling for Moses. "Pray to your God to stop this." But when the storm ceased at Moses' prayer, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more. Just as the people thought the worst had passed, a dark cloud appeared on the horizon. It was not a storm, but locusts. Swarms of them descended upon Egypt, devouring every green thing in their path. The crops left untouched by the hail were consumed in moments. Pharaoh's advisors pleaded with him, "Let these people go, or Egypt will be ruined." But Pharaoh, blinded by pride, refused to surrender. And then darkness fell. For 3 days, Egypt was cloaked in a shadow so thick it could be felt. The sun, the source of life and worship for the Egyptians, was blotted out. People stumbled through the blackness, unable to see even their own hands. Yet, in Goshen, light filled the homes of the Israelites. Pharaoh, now desperate, summoned Moses. But even after the light returned, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. The final plague struck Egypt to its core. In the dead of night, the angel of death passed through the land. From Pharaoh's palace to the humblest home, the firstborn of every family was taken. The cries of grief rose like a wave across Egypt, but in the homes marked with the blood of the Lamb, there was peace. Pharaoh, broken and defeated, called for Moses. "Go," he said, "take your people and leave. Take everything you own and go." And so the Israelites prepared to leave the land of their oppression, guided by the God who had delivered them. With Pharaoh's permission, the Israelites began their journey. They left Egypt, not as slaves, but as a free people. Yet Pharaoh's heart turned once more, and he pursued them to the edge of the Red Sea. There, God performed a final miracle. Moses stretched out his staff, and the waters parted. The Israelites crossed on dry ground, while Pharaoh's army was swallowed by the returning waves. That day, the God of Israel showed his might, and the people knew they would never return to the land of their captivity. Children, the story of the plagues is more than just a tale of miracles. It's a lesson about listening, trusting, and doing what's right. Pharaoh refused to obey God, and his stubbornness caused great suffering. But Moses trusted God and stood firm, even when the task seemed impossible. Remember, no matter how hard things seem, trusting in God's plan will always lead you to the right path. Be kind, humble, and listen to the voice of what's good and true. Like the Israelites, you too can find freedom and joy when you follow God's ways.